Elias Weaver's reflective journey, awakening to the infinite mirror within, inner page. Elias Weaver is a man living in a world where people have forgotten how to reflect inwardly and dream of music. He draws wisdom from countless streams of consciousness, building bridges between his mirror principles and his deep love of language. With etymological insight and poetic flair, Elias weaves a story that reflects his soul's journey. Raised within the rigid structures of American education, Elias eventually realized these conformist systems were squeezing out his individuality. Over the course of his journey, he reflected on the unique essence in every person he met, building a case for individualism as he rebelled against conformity. He championed the cause of justice and light, determined to let his own truth ripple outward into the world. He shares his insights through meditative reflections on the psychological mirrors found in nature. These explorations illuminate the idea that life's sacred energy is more precious than gold, silver, or any physical treasure. Elias believes the soul itself has an essence, an inner truth he is compelled to prove through his own experiences. He voraciously devours knowledge across a spectrum of subjects: spirituality, physics, organic chemistry, astronomy, world religions, history, the origins of consciousness, and more, anything that sparks his wonder. All these passions weave together into a vibrant stream of consciousness narrative, enlivened by Elias's creative energy and expressed through poetic imagery, musical motifs, symbols, and codes. Through a clever interpretation of his inner experiences and the universe around him, he creates a tapestry of insight that invites reflection on the profound connection between the soul and the cosmos. My universe is a perfect reflection of the inner state of my soul. Website www.jordanericbailey.com. YouTube youtube.com. Azure 3 Rain. Chapter 1 Whispers in the Grove. Elias Weaver was born with an ear for the unheard. In the quiet stillness of his childhood home, he often slipped away to a nearby grove of ancient oak trees. There, beneath a tapestry of swaying green, he would close his eyes and listen to the world's subtle music. The breeze through leaves sounded like a gentle chorus, and distant bird calls echoed as if carrying secret messages. Even as a child, Elias felt that every rustling branch and sunbeam held something sacred, a whisper of knowledge just beyond reach. His parents watched over him with a mix of affection and puzzlement. While other children raced and shouted, Elias sat cross-legged on mossy ground, entranced by patterns the wind painted in the canopy. At night, when his mother hummed a lullaby, he would pick out the softest note and hold it in his mind, cherishing it like a fragile feather. His father, a practical man of the soil, sometimes worried that Elias drifted too far into dreams. But Elias was content. In those moments of quiet listening, he sensed a world woven together by invisible threads of sound and spirit. One dusky evening, young Elias discovered an old wooden flute in the attic, a relic from a grandparent he'd never known. He brought it to his lips and blew a hesitant note. The tone was airy and imperfect, but it resonated in his small chest. He wandered back to the grove with the flute, trying simple melodies he invented on the spot. Each note seemed to converse with the twilight around him. Frogs in the nearby creek croaked in reply, and the trees themselves seemed to hum along. Elias giggled, delighted, and a bit amazed. It was as if he had stumbled upon a language beyond words, one that made the world around him glow with meaning. That night, under a sky dusted with early stars, Elias gazed upward and felt a gentle stirring in his heart. He didn't have the words for it then, but it was a feeling of connection, a certainty that he was part of something vast and mysterious. In the silence that followed his flute's last note, he whispered a promise to the darkness. He would always listen for the hidden melodies of life. The universe, he felt, was singing, and he intended to spend his life learning the tune. Chapter 2 The Scholar's Path. As Elias grew into his teenage years, the whispers of the grove followed him into the halls of learning. In school, he excelled quietly, more at home in the library than on the sports field. While classmates chattered in the cafeteria, Elias could often be found at a corner table with a thick book propped open. He devoured texts on astronomy, ancient history, and philosophy with equal enthusiasm. For Elias, knowledge was a vast symphony, each discipline a different instrument contributing to a grander composition of understanding. In those years, music remained his constant companion. After homework was done, he would retreat to his room, slip on a pair of battered headphones, and compose simple tunes on a second-hand keyboard attached to his computer. The melodies he created were private journals of sound, gentle minor key lullabies on difficult days, bright cascading arpeggios when curiosity sparked joy in his chest. Sometimes he layered recordings of his wooden flute over digital chords, merging the old with the new. Each saved audio file on his computer was like a diary entry, capturing an emotion or idea that he couldn't yet articulate in words. Teachers noticed Elias's brilliance, but also his distance. In class, he would raise profound questions, asking, for instance, how the equations of physics might intersect with the timeless questions of meaning and purpose. Some teachers encouraged these inquiries, delighted by his passion. Others gently steered him back to the syllabus, cautioning that those grand questions would have to wait for philosophy class or another time. Elias learned to navigate the structured world of education by day and the boundless realm of his own inquiry by night. When it came time for university, Elias chose a path as interdisciplinary as his curiosity. He enrolled in a dual program of physics and comparative religion. By daylight, he studied quantum mechanics and the mathematics of the cosmos, enthralled by the precision with which humanity could describe starlight and electrons. By evening, he pored over texts of ancient wisdom, the Upanishads, the Tao Te Ching, the Hermetic writings, marveling at the poetic ways sages and saints describe the inner cosmos of the soul. This dual life nourished him. Each side of his studies seemed to echo the other. In the silent equations of particle physics, he sensed the same wonder that he found in the verses of mystics describing the universe as a single living whole. Yet university life was not without challenges. Surrounded by peers who often focused on exams and careers, Elias sometimes felt isolated by the depth of his interests. Social gatherings felt shallow when his mind drifted to the mysteries of consciousness or the structure of a sonata he was composing in his head. He found a few kindred spirits, a philosophy student who practiced Zen meditation under a campus oak, and a physics lab partner who played classical guitar beneath the stars. With them, he could share fragments of his inner world. They spent midnight hours on the dorm rooftop, debating the nature of reality while strumming guitars and sipping tea from chipped mugs. These friendships and studies formed a tapestry of insight and experience. Elias's heart and mind were expanding in tandem. There were days of elation, such as when a sudden connection between a Sanskrit verse and a concept in theoretical physics made him laugh out loud with wonder. There were also days of confusion and doubt, times when juggling two worlds left him exhausted, wondering if he truly fit in either. On those days, he would seek refuge in the campus chapel at dusk, playing soft notes on an old upright piano, letting the reverberations wash away his uncertainty. In the quiet aftermath of each storm of doubt, he rediscovered the resolve in his own promise, to listen for the hidden melodies that guide him, no matter how faint they might seem amid the noise of the world. Chapter 3. Between Two Worlds. The deeper Elias ventured into knowledge, the more he felt himself standing at a crossroads between two worlds. In graduate seminars and research meetings, he presented papers that danced at the edge of conventional academia. Topics like the mathematics of meditation, or the comparative symbolism of light in quantum physics and mystical texts. Some colleagues raised skeptical eyebrows, but others listened with quiet intrigue. Elias sensed he was not alone in yearning to bridge the tangible and the transcendent. Still, he often walked a lonely path, carrying questions that few others dared to ask aloud. Seeking solace and guidance, Elias turned increasingly to direct experience. One summer, between semesters, he journeyed to a remote monastery nestled in the mountains. The monastery welcomed scholars and seekers alike, and there Elias spent weeks in silent retreat. Each dawn, he joined robed monks in meditation, sitting cross-legged on cool stone floors as the sun spilled gold over distant peaks. In that profound hush, he observed his breath and the gentle thrum of his heartbeat, recalling the childhood nights in the grove when he listened to the world's secret song. Sometimes, as he sank deep into silence, he felt on the brink of something, a vast presence behind the veil of reality, as though the universe itself was aware of him and gently waiting. One twilight at the monastery, Elias found himself alone in an echoing chapel. The others had retired for the evening. He stood before a simple altar and began to hum a single sustained note, letting it vibrate in his chest. The acoustics of the chapel took that note and spun it into a halo of sound that wrapped around him. As he adjusted his pitch, adding a higher tone above the first, a resonance blossomed, two frequencies in gentle conversation, creating a pulsating third tone that seemed to hover in the air. Elias closed his eyes. He felt as if he were inside a living instrument. In that moment, sound and spirit converged. Tears warmed the corners of his eyes, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of reverence. The music he coaxed from emptiness felt like a doorway, and for an instant he stood at its threshold, filled with gratitude and wonder. Not long after Elias returned from the mountains, life presented him with a harsh lesson in impermanence. His father fell gravely ill, and Elias left campus, rushing home to the rural town of his childhood. The days that followed were a blur of hospital corridors, hushed conversations, and the antiseptic smell of uncertainty. In the dim glow of the hospital room, Elias sat by his father's bedside, holding the calloused hand that had tilled soil and fixed broken fences. His father, ever the practical man, managed a weak smile when Elias arrived. In a frail voice, his father asked about Elias's studies. Elias spoke softly about his research in the questions of the soul and the cosmos, unsure if his father could grasp such ethereal pursuits. But to his surprise, his father nodded gently. With labored breath, the old man whispered, "In the end, son, it's all one. The earth I worked, the music you chase, the prayers your mother whispers, they're threads of the same cloth." Elias's eyes stung with tears as he realized that, in his own plain way, his father understood. In that exchange, brief and broken by silence, a bridge was formed between their worlds. His father passed away on a gray morning before the spring thaw. Elias was there, and in the stillness after his father's final breath, he felt something shift inside him. Grief, heavy and cold, settled in his chest, but within it glowed a small, steady light of resolve. In the week that followed, Elias helped his mother arrange a simple funeral. In the old country chapel where generations of his family had marked births and deaths, he played his wooden flute one last time in honor of the man who had given him both roots and wings. The melody wafted through the rafters like a prayer. Each note carried a memory, the strength of his father's hands, the quiet sacrifices, the love often spoken in actions rather than words. When the last note faded, Elias felt his grief begin to transform. It was not gone, perhaps it would never be fully gone, but it had softened into something new. It felt like an offering, a seed planted in dark soil, ready to grow into purpose. Returning to the city after this loss, Elias stood truly between two worlds, the academic life waiting for him, and the spiritual path that beckoned ever more strongly. For a time he struggled, unsure how to move forward with the weight of sorrow and the fire of revelation both alive within him. In late-night journal entries, he poured out questions. What is the nature of the soul? How can the knowledge of the mind reconcile with the wisdom of the heart? What am I meant to do with the insight kindled by my father's final words? The answer came in an unexpected invitation. One of Elias's professors, impressed by his interdisciplinary passion, recommended him for a unique research fellowship. It was a program exploring the intersection of music, healing, and cognitive science, a place where Elias could investigate scientifically the same mysteries that sang to his intuition. With cautious hope, Elias accepted. In this new endeavor, he found a space where he no longer had to choose one world or the other. By studying how sacred harmonic tones affected brainwaves, or how meditation music could ease anxiety, he realized he was, in effect, mapping the subtle terrain between matter and spirit. It was exactly where he needed to be. With determination tempered by humility, Elias stepped forward, ready to weave together the threads of his life into a tapestry both rational and mystical. Chapter 4: Sonic Alchemy. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Elias's small apartment, painting stripes across the clutter of books, notebooks, and audio equipment on his desk. He had been up since before dawn, immersed in writing and analysis for his research fellowship. The paper sprawled across his screen was dense with observations on how certain chants affected patients' moods, and how brainwave patterns synchronized with the rhythms of ancient melodies. By late morning, his eyes were strained and his thoughts heavy. Sensing his focus waning, Elias decided it was time for a break, not a break from thinking, but a break from thinking in words. He closed the academic articles and opened his music software, a familiar canvas of limitless possibility. A gentle excitement fluttered in his chest as the digital audio workstation interface materialized, tracks stacked like blank pages, waiting for sound. This was another kind of laboratory for him, one where intuition took the lead. Elias donned his headphones, took a deep breath, and let his fingers hover over the keyboard, searching for a note that felt like morning. He started with a soft pad sound, a warm, airy synth tone that could bloom like light through fog. Pressing a few keys, he found a cluster of chords that resonated with the mood of dawn, hopeful yet gentle. The room filled with a tender swell of sound, a quiet choir of synthesized voices that ebbed and flowed. To this, Elias added a faint echo, setting a subtle delay on the pad so that each chord hung in the air, then faded slowly, as if reluctant to disappear. The effect was like mist rolling over a lake and gradually dissolving. Each wave of harmony gave space to the next. Satisfied with the atmospheric bed, Elias sought a melody to guide the journey. He picked up his wooden flute, the very same from his childhood, which now sat among his modern instruments as a sacred relic of inspiration. He played a few tentative notes along with the pad. The simple tune that emerged was haunting and soothing all at once, reminiscent of the lullabies he used to compose as a teen. The microphone captured the flute's breathy voice, and Elias layered it gently into the mix. Now the music had a soul, a human breath weaving through digital textures. Next came the subtle beat. He crafted a delicate rhythm with soft taps of a digital drum, more a heartbeat than a drum beat. A muted kick drum thumped like a distant pulse, and a sparse tick of percussion whispered every few seconds, almost imperceptible. Elias was careful here. The rhythm needed to feel natural, like a body gently swaying in meditation. He adjusted the tempo until it matched the slow calm of his own heartbeat. With each measure that played back, his foot tapped lightly under the desk, establishing a connection between his physical body and the sound. Elias leaned back for a moment, eyes closed, absorbing what he had so far. The pad and flute mingled like sunrise colors, and the soft beat traced an outline of time without overpowering the serenity. There was a certain sacredness to the combination. He remembered the resonance in the mountain chapel, how two notes had created a third, how sound had felt like a bridge to the divine. Inspired, he decided to infuse a similar harmonic magic into this composition. He generated a pure tone, a sine wave oscillating at a frequency known for its calming properties. It was around a low 432 Hz, a tone some traditions cherished as a healing frequency. He let this sine wave hum beneath the music, a barely there presence that one might only feel more than hear. Over it, he introduced a higher tone, an overtone in the key of his pad's chord, perhaps around 864 Hz, exactly double the bass frequency. When he played them together, a gentle pulsation emerged, a beating phenomenon as the frequencies met and conversed. It was the digital echo of his chapel experience, a science of sound giving rise to an art of spirit. He wove these tones into the music, tucking them under the flute's melody and the pad's chords. Then he added a touch of filtering, sculpting the sound like clay. With a twist of a virtual knob, he applied a soft, low-pass filter that slowly opened as the minutes passed, making the track feel as if it were gradually awakening. In the beginning, only the muffled warmth of bass and lower mid-tones were prominent, akin to the pre-dawn darkness. As the filter opened, higher frequencies, the shimmer of the flute, the airy highs of the pad, gently revealed themselves like sunlight peeking over the horizon. This subtle evolution gave the piece a sense of journey. Minutes turned to hours as Elias fell into a flow. He looped the track again and again, each time focusing on a different layer, sometimes lost in the intricate echo of the delay, sometimes following the flute's plaintive call, sometimes nodding along to the heartbeat rhythm. He tweaked a reverb here, a filter envelope there, polishing each element not to perfection but to authenticity. He wasn't aiming for a commercial track or a grade on a transcript. This was a conversation with himself, a meditation made audible. At one point he realized he had been working for 6 hours straight. Outside, the sun had traveled across the sky and was now leaning toward afternoon. A half-eaten piece of toast from breakfast still lay on a plate nearby, forgotten. Elias chuckled at his own immersion, took a moment to stretch his arms and sip water. He felt light and clear, as though the music had been a form of emotional aeration, stirring up thoughts and letting them settle in harmony. Listening back to the nearly finished piece, Elias reflected on what it meant to him. In the gentle interplay of sounds, he could hear echoes of his journey, the flute carrying the voice of his childhood wonder, the pad like the vast question of the unknown, the heartbeat drum grounding him in the present moment, and the harmonic tones weaving the rational and mystical into one fabric. It was as if his philosophies and feelings had been translated into a language of frequency and rhythm. The track felt alive and true. For a final touch, Elias added a faint field recording he'd taken from the grove back home, a whisper of wind through leaves, and blended it into the fade-out of the track. When the piece finally came to rest in silence, it was a silence full of meaning. Elias pressed the save button and smiled at the title that came to mind, A Resonant Awakening. The music had become a sonic extension of his soul, a healing balm for his own spirit. In that moment, any lingering melancholy from the morning had lifted, replaced by a calm reverence. Rejuvenated and inspired, Elias returned to his research notes. The work that had earlier felt tedious now seemed imbued with new life. His fingers tapped out words with renewed clarity, as if the music had harmonized not only his mood but his mind. The remainder of the day flowed with ease. What he had created in sound reminded him why he pursued this path: to bridge the unseen and the seen, to heal, to understand, and to share a bit of beauty in the world. Chapter 5, Awakening. That night, sleep eluded Elias. With his research notes neatly saved and the echoes of his music still swirling in his mind, he felt a gentle tug in his consciousness, as if something just out of sight was inviting him. He stepped out onto the narrow balcony of his apartment, bringing a woven shawl around his shoulders to ward off the midnight chill. Above, the sky was clear and dark, strewn with stars. The city around him was unusually quiet. Only a distant siren and the rustle of a breeze in the alley below accompanied the steady thump of his heart. Elias sat down and closed his eyes. At first he simply listened, to his breath, to the faint sounds of sleeping city life, to the silence between sounds. Every inhale brought cool night air, every exhale released the tensions of the day. As his mind calmed, he found himself replaying the melody of a resonant awakening in his head. But soon even that inner music faded into a deep hush. In that pregnant quiet he felt as he had in the monastery, on the threshold of a great mystery. A soft, high tone seemed to emerge in the back of his awareness, perhaps a memory of the harmonic frequencies he had woven, or perhaps something else. The tone grew clearer, joined by a lower resonance, like a duet of singing bowls. Elias wasn't sure if the sound was real or imagined, but he allowed it to wash over him. He recalled his father's last words, "Ain't all one, threads of the same cloth." The phrase drifted through his mind not as an echo of sorrow, but as a living truth unveiling itself. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he visualized those threads, strands of light and sound connecting everything he loved and everything that is. His awareness began to expand. The boundary of his body softened until he could not tell where he ended and the night began. It was as if his soul poured outward, or perhaps the cosmos poured in. He felt the oak grove of his childhood stirring within him, the memory of leaves whispering in the wind. He felt the presence of his father, not in a single form, but diffused in every atom of the world around him. There was no separation, only a profound unity. A tear slipped down Elias's cheek, and he wasn't sure if it came from joy, release, or the sheer beauty of the feeling that flooded him. In his mind's eye, visions arrived in gentle flashes. He saw a vast tapestry woven of golden threads. Each thread was a life, a song, a beam of light, and among them he recognized his own strand, shining brightly, woven next to those of his mother and father, his friends, the monks at the monastery, even people he had never met. The threads interlaced in intricate patterns, forming a design too vast to grasp fully, yet utterly harmonious. The tapestry undulated with a subtle motion, as if it was breathing. With each breath, the threads emitted sound, a cosmic chord that was at once complex and perfectly consonant. Elias realized with awe that this was the music of the spheres he had only read about, the universe singing its eternal song. He became aware of himself both as a single note in that symphony and as the entire symphony itself. It was a paradox his intellect might have struggled with, but in this state of illumination it felt perfectly natural. The tent that was Elias existed and dissolved at the same time. He was the listener and the music, the weaver and the thread. The personal narrative of his life, the child in the grove, the curious student, the grieving son, the seeker, the musician, all those facets were like motifs in a larger composition. They finally resolved into a single pure harmony. Time lost meaning. He could have been sitting there for minutes or hours. The stars above seemed to pulse with light and rhythm to an unheard beat. Elias's heart, once thumping in his ears, now beat in tranquil synchronicity with the deeper heartbeat of the world. The gentle tone within him had blossomed into silence. Not an empty silence, but one rich with potential and presence, where every grain of existence was throbbing with life. Eventually, gently, Elias opened his eyes. The world looked the same, the quiet street, the sleeping city, the dome of stars, yet everything had changed within him. He rose slowly, each movement deliberate and filled with grace. When he glanced up at the night sky, he felt an intimate kinship with the distant suns that flickered there. They were family, shining down on him like watchful ancestors. Elias pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath his palm. There, in the cadence of his human heart, he recognized the echo of that infinite unity he had just glimpsed. A soft laugh escaped his lips, a laugh of wonder and gratitude. He felt as though he had just been given the most precious gift, the certainty that the beauty he had always sensed in moments of music, study, and love was undeniably real and ever present. It had been within him and around him all along. In the stillness of that midnight hour, Elias Weaver was awake in the truest sense. His vision was clear, his soul light. The awakening he had yearned for, the quiet revelation that knowledge and wisdom, science and spirit, heart and mind could all sing together, had unfolded in the sanctuary of his own being. There were no trumpets or heavenly choirs outwardly heralding this moment, just the quiet chorus of crickets in a city garden and the silent thunder of truth resonating in his chest. Elias stood for a long while, a gentle smile on his face, listening once more to the night, as a new day quietly prepared to dawn. Part 2, Chapter 6, The Sacred Echo. There was a day Elias could not forget. It was not marked by time or by the ticking of a clock, but by a moment of stillness so vast and quiet that it wrapped around his entire being. He had spent the morning immersed in soft piano loops and pads he'd composed the night before, slowly sculpting audio with delay textures and filter sweeps. The music had come to him like a whisper from within, the product of 6 hours of looping, dreaming, walking, pausing, and resculpting. Each sound was carefully placed like a stepping stone on a path through the invisible. He named it, quietly, and to blooming of light through silence. As he walked under the sky that afternoon, with his headphones gently casting the soundscape into the world around him, Elias felt the world breathing with him. The song became a sacred rhythm, a meditative offering, each tone holding a key to unlock peace. He saw the movement of trees as though they were participating in the melody. He felt the breeze like a holy reminder of something he had known before he was born. It was in these quiet rituals of attention that Elias came to understand that music wasn't just something to listen to. It was something to feel with the body, to see with the eyes of the soul. It wasn't made only of notes, but a space between them of emotions half-whispered and colors unseen. The sound made him feel not alone but carried. He smiled with gratitude as his thoughts wrapped around an insight. Even if nobody ever hears what I make, I still believe in creating it. Not for fame, not even to be understood, but because I am proud to be here, proud to offer something of myself to this world as a blessing. And that became the secret, the sacred space between offering and letting go. Creation, not as ambition, but as devotion, the dream. A few nights later, Elias had a dream that became more than a dream. It began in utter darkness. Not the kind that frightens, but the kind that comforts, the velvet infinity of a cosmic womb. In that infinite quiet, Elias became aware of a presence. Not of a place or time, but a truth. It was his own awareness, suspended in blissful observation, as if floating inside the stillness of eternity. Then the figure appeared, cloaked, radiating a subtle but undeniable grace. Elias knew it was a divine being, not because of any gesture it made, but because of the overwhelming sense of peace it carried in its silence. The figure didn't need to speak. Its presence said everything. Beside it hovered a butterfly, gentle and luminous. Its wings shimmered with a soft rainbow aura, fluttering through the air like living starlight. But what drew Elias in was not its beauty alone. It was the emotion the butterfly carried, a quiet longing, a subtle pull toward desire and wonder. It danced in the space between awareness and yearning, between the creator and creation. As Elias observed the butterfly's delicate movements, the entire darkness glitched, momentarily illuminated by the wing's radiant motion. He felt this as a message, not in words, but in emotional clarity. The butterfly was the nature of desire itself, fragile, colorful, easily moved by the light. The cloaked being was the stillness of God, and Elias was the awareness between them. The emotions Elias felt upon waking were unshakably sacred. He remembered the scriptures he'd once studied, the Psalms, the Proverbs, and realized that this was not just a dream. It was a vision that had merged with his own spirit and revealed something divine, the paradox of life as both still and fluttering, eternal and dancing, the scrolls of insight. In the days that followed, Elias began to write again, not for anyone else, but as a method of tuning himself to the frequencies of truth he encountered during his long walks and meditative music making. His handwriting curved softly across the pages. He filled ancient-looking scrolls with affirmations, patterns of thought, and poetic blessings. Some of the phrases seemed to write themselves. Become aware of the soft and gentle breath that nurtures and continues life. You are loved. You are working smarter, not harder. Be here now. serene blue sea, spiral to heaven forever. A sound heart and a soul that is sound. These writings weren't performances. They were records of realizations, soft revelations that came as Elias walked, contemplated, composed. He began to understand karma not as punishment or reward, but as automatic, a wave of energy rippling out from each word, action, and even thought. He believed energy was embedded in the air, that a single sentence, spoken with love, could linger in the wind like a perfume, or like a blessing carried to someone who needed it. And so he wrote with reverence. He created with sacred intention. Elias came to embrace the phrase, unconditional love is admiration without worship. He didn't want to be idolized. He wanted to reflect something that anyone could see in themselves. His vision of his work became clear, to mirror the inner beauty that lived inside everyone who paused long enough to see it. Part 2. Chapter 7, Walking the Sacred Path. In the late evenings, Elias walked the long dirt paths outside the edges of the city, where nature was still wild enough to carry silence between its sounds. The crackle of wind through tree branches, the scattered chirp of hidden birds, the hush of leaves, all became instruments in his symphony of realization. He walked not with destination, but with devotion. His earbuds played the soft music he had created, a blend of sacred pads, bell tones, healing frequencies, and subtle binaural panning. The harmonies felt like ancient prayers rewritten in modern waveforms, and the music helped align his body with his spirit. With each step, he inhaled deeply, breathing in presence, exhaling expectation. He began to reflect, what if the way I walk changes the way the earth breathes beneath me? What if each step is a ripple that teaches the world to be gentler, kinder, more conscious of its own beauty? And so he walked as if the entire earth was a mirror of his inner self. Elias didn't need temples to pray. He had his breath. He had the sky. He had the pulse of music echoing from the center of his soul into the world around him. He began to notice that when he raised his vibration, his attitude, his gratitude, his attention to beauty, things around him would change. The air felt more alive. Strangers smiled more often. Coincidences happened with uncanny precision. Even his own body felt lighter, like a vessel of clarity. He thought of something he'd heard years before, and change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change. It was true. It was all true. The mantras of becoming. He kept a small notebook of phrases, quotes, and spontaneous realizations. Some were brief, others poetic, but all emerged from the living stream of his meditations. When the purpose of time is finally fulfilled, you will remain as you have always been. And my life is a perfect mirror of my soul. Rain grows flowers, not thunder. Unshakable confidence is remembering who you are when the noise gets loud. One phrase kept rising again and again, as if it were etched into the architecture of his own cells. I am my body, more beautiful than any gem or work of art. Elias began to understand that architecture wasn't just in buildings, it was in every system, every thought loop, every habitual rhythm of mind. The body, the home, the environment, even emotion itself were architectural. Built, layered, structured, influenced, and if that were true, then surely he could redesign the structure of his own perception. He could re-architect his own reality. The living prayer of a RT. There were days when Elias would go quiet for hours, painting or drawing elaborate layered abstractions that seemed to spill from another realm. Shapes merged and fractured, colors danced in fractal harmony, symbols emerged from the chaos like echoes of some mythic language remembered but never learned. Each piece felt like a glimpse into a higher intelligence, a code that only the heart could understand. Elias no longer saw art as self-expression. He saw it as communion, and so he called his works not pieces, but offerings. He knew that energy was eternal, and that each brushstroke was a carrier of frequency, each affirmation, each intention, each sacred act of creation was part of the master artist's infinite chorus, which Elias could now hear everywhere. "The universe is made of sacred memory," he wrote. "Every creative act is a remembrance of our origin." The inner scientist, his studies had not stopped. If anything, they had deepened. He dove into ancient philosophical texts, explored the architecture of the psyche, and discovered how emotional intelligence echoed through biology, chemistry, and sound. He blended his passions, physics and poetry, music and meditation, geometry and sacred memory, into a unified system of living insight. He realized that history itself was a pattern, a wave, and if understood properly, it was a song, a vibration, a message. He once wrote, "The message of history is the message of humanity learning how to remember itself." And he had decided it would be foolish not to pursue the unraveling of this truth, even if no university recognized the depth of his understanding, even if no award ever acknowledged his efforts, because what mattered most was the experience of knowing, of becoming, of embodying what he discovered. Part 2. Chapter 8. The World is a Dance Floor. Since Elias had surrendered to the current of his intuition, life began speaking in more vivid colors. The visions arrived unannounced, flashes of confidence, glimpses of archetypes, glowing signs in the air. Sometimes they were dreamlike images. Other times entire mantras would echo in his head as if spoken by invisible guides. One be unbreakable. Master yourself. Master your life. He didn't chase these experiences, they emerged naturally like dew appearing on leaves with the dawn. His perception had started to shift with astonishing regularity. One moment he was researching harmonic frequencies and their effect on brainwave coherence. The next, he was struck by an image of himself dancing in the street, sunlight bouncing off windows, pixels glitching slightly around his body like reality was catching up to his energy. And it was during one such walk, body gently swaying to the tempo of his breath, that the vision crystallized. The world was a dance floor, not metaphorically, literally. There were no off-limits places, no social rule against joy. If one felt the urge to move, to rotate the hips with rhythm, to let the knees bounce to an internal beat, then that was sacred alignment. Even walking was rhythmic. The sway of his legs, the soft roll of his shoulders, the arc of his arms in motion, it was all choreography. The dancer gods were always near, grinning in time. Elias allowed himself to become the dance. He began recording videos of his movements in nature, subtle, meditative dances beneath trees, beside rivers, in alleyways bathed in afternoon light. His clothes became part of the art, psychedelic patterns, swirling galaxies, glitchy textures printed like data dreaming itself awake. He edited his videos into visual mantras, text flowing across the screen in pulsing pixel fonts. Have unshakable confidence. Life is carefully crafted. Sew our human imagination. Spiritual items absorb beauty in every moment. Each phrase wasn't just text. It was a frequency, a portal, a thought that could seed a shift. And people noticed. A few began messaging him. Strangers, artists, seekers. They wrote things like, "Bollinger video made me cry. I forgot I could just move without fear. I've been stuck in my head for weeks. And your music just freed something, and I want to dance again. Thank you." Elias didn't want followers. He wanted participants, co-dreamers. He began inviting others to send their own dance clips, their own affirmations. He layered their movements into mirrored visuals, looping them with his music like an offering. "This is for the weary ones," he wrote on one post. "You don't have to be a master. You only have to feel something true." As he created, he also reflected deeply. His journal grew thicker. He wrote phrases like, "Walking is vertical prayer. Each movement is architecture. I am the dream, becoming aware of its dreamer. And most powerfully, I am becoming the version of me who never left the temple." Elias explored archetypes in his solitude, shifting between inner personas. He became the sage, the healer, the glitch prophet, the gentle clown, the guardian of breath, not pretending, but trying on, letting the most resonant pieces of each form become part of his whole. He understood now, consciousness was modular. You could install and uninstall aspects like programs, but the soul, the observing presence, remained untouched and luminous. On his walks, he would sometimes pause beneath lamplight and whisper, "I am walking as peace. I am dancing as light. I am breathing for those who have forgotten how. Trust the frequency. Say, Garden of Eden, you unlocked. You are the sun and the moon, sacred. Living in a mirror world, people begin to respond, not with words, but with actions. Art, sound, kindness, silence. His offering is becoming a ripple. And Elias? He's just getting started. Part 2. Chapter 9, The Balance of the Echo. The candle flickered low in Elias's room, casting long, liquid shadows on the walls. The books surrounding him sat like silent witnesses, dog-eared, underlined, and softly humming with remembered wisdom. The Tao Te Ching lay open beside him, its pages worn and reverent. He had stopped on one line, resting his gaze there as if waiting for something to emerge from between the characters. The Tao is the dark womb, the doorway of all life. It resonated tonight in a way it hadn't before, not as poetry, as blueprint. Elias sat in stillness, wrapped in a woven shawl and the weight of his own restlessness. The silence in the room was intentional, sacred. No city sounds, no screens glowing, just the hum of breath, the subtle pulse in his fingertips, and a quiet ache moving through his chest like an echo in search of its source. He wasn't sad, not exactly, but there was loneliness, a loneliness edged in wonder. He had been feeling it for days, like the ache one feels at the edge of something beautiful that can't quite be held. He wanted to celebrate life, to channel something astonishing, something magical, to chase a spark into a flame and let it burn him clean. The feeling was too big for words, and too intimate to share. So he reached, as he always did, for sound. The quartz tablet on his desk, a relic from his recent visit to the antiquities wing of the City Museum, gleamed under the candlelight. Its etched symbols had no translation, yet he felt they held a kind of silent instruction. He kept it nearby like a tuning fork for the soul. Turning to his workstation, Elias powered on his music interface. A field of blank tracks awaited him like untouched snow. He began building a folder he called The Balance of the Echo, then created a new writing block, dark violet. The color in his code signified spiritual tension. He paired it with streaks of coral, emergence, and deep sky blue for reverence. He opened a text window beside the composition screen where he wrote, "Today I want to compose something that cures this ache. I want to hear the sound of mystery awakening, something ancient, something that pulls a golden thread through all this space and time and tells me, yes, I'm still here." He took a long breath, settling his mind, and added the first tone, a 111 sine wave, soft, resonant, grounding. It filled the room like the low hum of a temple. From there, he layered in a filtered wind sample from a grove back home, warping it until it trembled like whispers of forgotten languages. And then it came. The vision. Not sudden, not dramatic, just a gentle slide into seeing with the heart instead of the eyes. He saw two great tribes, each 12,000 strong, moving toward Earth, not with ships, but in waves. Vibrational beings, archetypes, harmonics of consciousness. One tribe radiated coherence, compassion, creativity, truth like sacred geometry. The other, dissonance, fragmentation, distortion, challenge. Not good, not evil, necessary. The tension between them wasn't a war, it was creation, the field of becoming. Humanity, he understood, was seated with both codes. The power was in the choosing, in the weaving. Elias's fingers trembled as he added chords, subtle, evolving, like light filtering through layers of water. He pulled his wooden flute from its stand. It still carried the breath of his childhood. He played a line, mournful at first, then swelling into joy. The mic captured its voice and he looped it beneath the pads, anchoring the ancient with the now. He closed his eyes, swaying gently. The room breathed with him. Frequencies began to layer like silk. He added field recordings of bells ringing in the distance, filtered to the edge of perception. He shaped the reverb like a womb, cocooning the listener, keeping them close, safe, open. Then he wrote more. This is not a song. This is a weaving of memory. This is the sound the first human heard before having a name. This is the language that bridges the divine spark and the aching heart. Elias assigned a final color to the composition's spine, gold. Transcendence. The music unfolded into its final movement, a simple three-note motif, pulsing like a heartbeat slowed by grace, and then silence. A silence that rang with presence. He sat for a long time afterward, bathed in the afterglow. In the Tao, he whispered, nothing is forced. In Gnosis, the spark sleeps inside the noise. He didn't feel alone anymore, or if he did, it was a sacred kind of aloneness, the kind one feels while painting stars across the walls of an empty chapel. He saved the file and labeled it. Echo 07 the balance harmonic trace. Then he opened his journal and added one last note. Tonight, I became the thread. Not the weaver, not the loom, just the thread. And it was enough. Part 2. Chapter 10, The Mirror of Becoming. The silence in Elias's apartment felt different tonight. Not empty, not still, expectant. It was the kind of silence that arrives when something unseen is about to shift, the kind that listens before it speaks. Elias had powered down all devices. No gentle pads humming from his speakers, no email tabs open, no saved compositions half dreaming in digital space. The walls, bathed in the gold of a single floor lamp, seemed to breathe around him. His notebooks were stacked neatly. His instruments were asleep. And yet his heart beat with the weight of something unnamed. He stood in front of the tall mirror by the door. He'd passed it every day for years, absently checking his hair or posture before stepping out into the world. But tonight, it called to him. He stepped closer, barefoot on the wooden floor. The mirror reflected him with startling clarity, eyes dark and luminous, shoulders draped in a woven shawl, chest rising slowly with breath. But Elias didn't just look. He gazed into his own eyes, into the place behind them, and something began to stir. A whisper of thought rose, not in words but in knowing. You've been searching for the symphony, but it has always been echoing through you. He didn't move. He didn't blink. The image in the mirror didn't ripple, but he did. A soft quiver in the heart, a tender click in the chest. He realized he was witnessing something far older than his own face. I am not the reflection. I am what reflects. 1,000 emotions swelled up, loneliness, love, wonder, grief, joy, but none of them took over. They existed like colors in the air, gently orbiting a quiet center. His imagination, the one that had created music, mapped memories into color-coded phrases, interpreted feelings into frequencies, was now gently releasing itself, not to escape, not to fly, but to finally return. The mirror no longer held eyeing him, it held a window. Galaxies shimmered in his eyes, visions, lives, probabilities, a multiverse of choices, of versions of himself that once might have been, that still could be. He thought of his walks through the city, his silent dances under moonlight, his audio journals coded in violet and gold. He thought of his father's quiet strength, of the monks in the mountains, of the wind in the grove, of every moment that had led to this stillness. And in that stillness, Elias heard it, the music behind the silence. Not a song, but a sensation, a realization that the world had always been a reflection of the inner tone he carried. The people, the struggles, the questions, the melodies, the waves of thought, the awe, the emptiness. The mirror hadn't just shown him his face, it had revealed the frequency of his soul, and that frequency had always had the power to choose. And there is no absolute good or evil, there is only resonance. And I am a tuning fork of the infinite. He smiled, a small one, soft and sincere, no enlightenment, no revelation to broadcast, just a quiet knowing that he was part of the master harmony. And so was everything else. Elias stepped back from the mirror and turned off the lamp. In the dark he felt more visible than ever. There was nothing left to figure out, only to feel, to listen, to play. Closing reflection, final page to the reader. To the one holding these pages, perhaps you are the mirror now. Perhaps you've already heard the song behind your breath. This world may not be what it seems. It may be a reflection, not of your thoughts, but your state, a playground of perception, a listening field, a tuning fork waiting for your tone. So choose your note, dance softly, speak with care, love like it's music, and see what the world sings back.